Welcome to the NSCHBC Edge podcast, leading the way in the business of medicine. Now here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NSCHBC Edge podcast. I'm your host, Terry Fletcher. The Edge podcast is brought to you today by the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants. Our goal is to discuss healthy business principles, have conversations on the business side of medicine so that you and your practice can thrive and be profitable and successful for years to come. As many of you know, the NSCHBC is a proactive organization with over 300 members, including legacy members that share their wealth of knowledge and expertise with each other, whether it be in legal field, the accounting field, the revenue cycle management field, the business management field, value-based care, physician practice, profit centers, and more. We have every kind of consultant that focuses on the healthcare industry that you could want. Which makes me happy today. I'm welcoming back fellow NSCHBC member, certified healthcare business consultant, David Zetter of Zetter Healthcare. Hi, David. Welcome back.
Thanks, Terry. Happy to be here.
So Dave and I are going to talk about some information that I know people have inquired about. I know that it's something that is trying to find some revenue opportunities for physicians that you may not understand some of the intricacies. Now, this isn't a webinar, so we're not doing an education, but we are basically going to have a conversation about ASCs, Ambulatory Surgery Centers, and the difference between ASCs and maybe an office-based lab, and just really just trying to figure out, things like funding and accreditations, maybe safety, just really having a brief conversation, but understanding if you're thinking about going in that direction, if you're a private practice, or if you're somebody that's trying to break out of where you're at and you want to open up a separate entity, just really where to go first. So David, that's where I'm going to start. I know there is a difference. One is in the office-based lab, and one is a separate brick and mortar, if you will, separate building. Which is one, and just kind of jumping right in, what's easier to get funding for to start the process?
Well, when you compare an ASC to an OBL is much less expensive to get into practice than an ASC is, because you're going to jump through a lot of federal regulations as well as state and Department of Health regulations, life safety, and so on. So think of an ASC is that you're going to have a complete full operation in that surgery center, meaning full operative rooms. You're going to have doctors coming in and out. You're going to have full staff and so on. Whereas an OBL is just a physician's practice. There really isn't much difference to an OBL and a physician's practice, other than the fact that they have a room that they set aside for a procedure room, along with some equipment in order to perform the procedures that are allowed in an office-based setting. So to get an office up and running normally, and even with OBLs we've set up several this year. I've got clients that set it up with, one set it up with less than, actually, I think it was less than $80,000 as a startup loan. And then we obtained $150,000 line of credit to, pay all the bills and everything after they opened their doors in order to fund operations until cash flow came in. Whereas a surgery center, you've got an awful lot more costs. And I would say depending on what you're looking at, how many ORs you're looking at putting together, and how many recovery rooms and things like that, you've got an awful lot more money involved in that. So it's going to be much tougher obtaining financing for an ASC than it would an OBL. And then you've got the variables on, okay, what's your credit rating? What's your loan, loan to, or revenue to loan ratio, income to loan ratio, things like that. The bankers are always looking at. So you've got a lot of different variables you have to consider, but definitely ASCs are going to be more expensive.
So that brings me to an interesting just thought. I didn't even send you this question, but just before I get into some of the other, administrative things, if you're in the office under the OBL, is it the same tax ID where you don't have to get new contracts? Because I know with ASC, you do have to get under contract.
No, the OBL is literally a physician's practice. So like when we go in and do credentialing and contracting,
Right.
whether it's a physician's practice, a surgery center, an OBL, whatever the case may be, we're going to make each payer aware of every single procedure that's going to be billed out of that entity. So
Okay.
like on an OBL, we're going to be communicating office level visits, E&M codes. We're going to be communicating procedure codes. We're going to be communicating anything that the provider is going to do and wants to bill for. And then that way, the payer knows exactly what procedures and services need to be covered under that contract. And they also send us back all fee schedules tied to that contract. So the client knows exactly what they're getting paid for each service. And in an OBL, you're billing what is called a global fee. Technically, it's not even, it is that, but technically it's still, you're just billing professional fees. But in an OBL, you get paid a lot more for that service than you would in a surgery center, because the surgery center gets to bill the facility fee, whereas the doctor gets to bill the professional fee. And in an OBL, the payers pay a whole heck of a lot more because they don't have a facility fee. And a lot of times that global fee, that reimbursement rate that the payers are going to pay, that, vascular or cardiovascular physician, whatever the case may be, a lot of times that reimbursement can be a heck of a lot higher than what the facility fee was. And what I mean by that, it can be from 3 to 19 times the facility fee. So as a professional, you're going to get paid quite a bit of money.
Yeah, I have a couple of practices that have done that were in ASCs, and then they switched to office-based labs for their peripheral vascular lower extremity, let's say ablations in lower extremities. And they just said, we're getting almost 3,000, an extremity instead of what we were getting at 600 and 700,
Exactly.
So it was absolutely crazy. Now, one of the things I did notice when, not just for OSHA safety protocols, but also JCO accreditation, if you're on an office-based lab, they do require a dedicated room within the practice, correct? You can't double use it for like E&M?
I would always suggest that you have a procedure. You can still do an E&M in there. I mean,
Okay.
Nobody's going to be watching you and say, okay, in which room did you perform this procedure? Okay. Normally, any surgeon that's going to be providing these kinds of services is going to have a dedicated room, but that's not to say they can't use it to just do an office visit in it if they aren't doing a procedure in there at that point in time.
Oh, okay. I thought it had to be separate. So that's good to know, actually, as far as expenses and stuff.
Well, let me put it this way. It needs to be separate, meaning you need to have a proper room where you're going to perform those OBL procedures, but that doesn't mean you can't do an E&M procedure in that room if it's not currently being used for a procedure.
So it's not like your regular exam rooms could be used for a procedure that would be approved in an OBL. It's in the reverse. If it's an OBL room and you just don't happen to have a procedure that day, you can do an E&M.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So that it works in reverse on one side, basically, because you still have those safety protocols for anything that is procedural, all the things they need to have, sometimes refrigeration, sometimes, certain things
Well, I mean, I've got interventional radiologists and vascular surgeons that are using fluoroscopy. So you're not going to have that fluoroscope being moved around the rooms. It's too big to be moving,
right,
especially through a doorway.
Right. That's a good example.
So a lot of times they just leave it in that one room, and that's the one room they're going to perform all their procedures in. I do have a client that does move their fluoroscope from room to room because they have much bigger doorways, and he designed it that way so that he could do a procedure in any room he wanted, but he set them all up so that they have exactly the supplies and the resources that he needs so that he can do a procedure in any exam room that he has.
Okay. And are there certain safety protocols to do procedures that are in an office-based lab versus what you would do in an ASC?
Well, yeah, an ASC is you're going to have a lot more regulations and requirements and compliance requirements than an OBL does. I mean, for the most part, the OBL, the physician just needs to make sure that they have the resources available that they need in order to conduct a secure, safe environment for the patient in order to perform that procedure.
Or is one way to differentiate between the two? Because again, I get people saying, well, what should we do? What should we do? Would it be depending upon what kind of anesthesia you need? Because I would think it wouldn't be likely that you would use general anesthesia or monitored anesthesia in an office. But in an ASC, you would use both, maybe.
That is also going to depend on state regulations and what the variables are that are required for that practice and what type of procedures are being done. So, I
Okay.
mean, you're looking at a lot of variables here, and it all depends. Like a vascular surgeon I've got somebody that just does, like you mentioned, lower extremity. They do a lot of peripheral arterial disease
Yeah.
procedures in order to prevent amputation.
Yeah.
And they use a fluoroscope. Whereas if you're going to have a cardiologist that's going to be doing more things, whether it's just veins or whether they're doing other types of procedures that would be allowed in an office-based setting, that maybe used to only be allowed in an ASC, but maybe some of those procedures are now allowed to be in an office-based setting. The requirements are going to be much less in that office-based setting than in a surgery center. So I'm not a clinician. I can't comment on all the specific requirements that a physician needs in order to make sure that they have a safe and secure environment for that patient and that procedure. They're going to be more adept at that than I would be. And we usually are dealing with somebody in the practice that is going to be managing that and has that knowledge with the physician as well. We're normally assisting them with getting set up, financing, contracts, credentialing, that type of thing. We do that with surgery centers as well, but surgery centers take an awful lot longer to get done, set up, certified, and approved versus an OBL, which there is no certification. It's just a regular Medicare enrollment. And then you enroll with each, commercial payer that you want to participate with. And that's it. Whereas a surgery center, you're jumping through an awful lot more hoops.
Right. And one of the things I know I've done, so I haven't set people up for OBLs or ASCs, but I have worked with the Joint Commission, when I say JCO, in making sure, like you said, safety protocols are met and what they need for each site to make sure that, again, these procedures are appropriate for the setting. What I am finding, and I don't know if you find this, David, in setting up the administrative and financial end of it, because I know this is a question that comes up from providers, and maybe we can't answer this question because maybe it's a state issue, but it is an interesting question that they want to know, okay, tell me the list that I can do in the ASC and tell me the list that I can do in the office-based lab. And I'm finding the lists are usually on the payer websites, not necessarily anywhere else. I've even seen it be a little bit gray on, CMS websites, but it seems like you have to kind of look at payer contract and language as you're going into it. Are you finding that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Because even though Medicare may allow some procedures in an office-based lab, you've got some commercial payers that may not allow for that.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing as well.
So yeah, you definitely want to, that's why we send out CPT and HCPCS codes to each payer, and we want them to validate, yes, you're going to cover these services under this contract.
Okay, so there is a process when they're setting any of these up before, or an inquiry process before they kind of move forward with which way they want to go.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's kind of interesting. Now, just kind of moving off in a different direction, but same topic a little bit. One thing I have had some intense conversations, see how I was nice there, with providers about this, is a lot of providers that before really office-based labs was a thing, because to me, that's kind of fairly new with coming not just from ASCs, because those have been around for a long time. But I'm finding that, for example, with ASCs, you can have outside providers, outside physicians be a part of that. Usually they put, anesthesiologists on rotation. But I've found that some practices, because they're like, I want to get a facility fee for everything, they try to do things in their ambulatory surgery center that they own that may not necessarily need to be done in an ambulatory surgery center. And trying to discourage them from doing that for everything is like pulling teeth sometimes. What is your response to that?
Well, I let them know that, look, you're going to perform a procedure in a surgery center that could have been performed in your office-based setting. First of all, why would you do that? I'm
Yeah.
going to show them, I want to know what the rationale for it is. And then I'm going to show them the reimbursement with the facility fee for the surgery center compared to their reimbursement for doing it in an office-based setting. Usually, the reimbursement in the office-based setting is going to be higher even when you add the professional fee and the facility fee together if the physician has ownership in that surgery center. But you also have to think about this. How many partners do they have in that surgery center, and how many times is that pie going to be split for the profits for all the owners? Okay,
Right.
because you cannot earn your income or the revenue, you cannot split profits in a surgery center based on your productivity. It's against the law.
Right.
So you have to split it on a different criteria, which usually is either based on a percentage of ownership or based on some other calculation other than productivity, because you got self-referral laws that you've got to monitor and make sure that you're complying with.
Right. And I've also, and just in continuing that conversation, one of the things that leads into the conversation about, can I do it in here or can I not? Not everything is office-based lab global or ASC. It's just a minor procedure in the office with a 25 modifier in the E&M if it's at the same time, if it's necessary, just like, taking off a mole or something versus taking off a benign lipoma or a benign lesion that needed a little more space to do that and actually more in a controlled setting. So or if they just need a knee injection or, instead of actually they needed maybe a lower spine injection. It's interesting because as I'm talking to even payers about this, it's hard to get that concept to the physicians that just because you have it, you don't always have to use it in that way. It's not always, the case. And it's sometimes it is difficult.
Well, that's correct. And, going back to your original question about, okay, do you decide to do it in the office or do you decide to do it in the ASC? The other thing to consider, besides what the reimbursement is what is it going to tell the payer when you're trying to do all these procedures in a surgery center so that you can get your facility fee if you're not real attuned as to what your contracts are in each location? Well, that would be the first thing that you need to learn, because you could be making a grave mistake from a revenue and profitability standpoint by performing all those procedures in the surgery center when you may be paid more in your office-based lab. But more importantly, what are you telling the payers? So,
Right.
for instance, let me give you this comparison. You're going to provide, so let's say you are a doctor, you're a surgeon, and you either have a choice on performing procedures in a hospital OR, a surgery center, or an office. And let's say that procedure can be done in any location. Now, if you do it in an OR, you're telling the payer you don't care what it costs them or the patient. You're going to do it in an OR that's owned by a hospital or health system, and they're going to charge them an arm and a leg. So right there, you're seen as somebody that's increasing the cost of healthcare. It's kind of like any provider that refers to an out-of-network provider for that patient's diagnostic tests, procedures, whatever they need. You're sending them to an out-of-network provider. That is a black eye as far as for you, as far as the payer is concerned, because you're increasing their costs and you're increasing the cost to the patient. So yes, payers talk out of both sides of their mouth. They'll tell you, oh, we want you to lower the cost of healthcare, but then they tell you you have to perform this procedure in this hospital over here, which you know darn well they're going to charge an arm and a leg for that facility fee. It's always more expensive in a hospital. So why would a payer do that? Well, there may be other variables that come into play there, that has to do with either contracting with that hospital or something else that's going on. You're not always going to know that, but you also need to be aware on what that's going to do, what kind of a story you're telling the payer based on the fact that you're willing to have it cost more to the insurance and the patient versus trying to find the most cost efficient process in order to perform that procedure.
Well, and one thing too is you brought up a really good point, actually 2 points, as far as self-referred things that you do that providers do. This is something that comes up quite a bit for me, and it's different on every state. For example, if you have a provider that has an ASC, and so they think that 100% of their patients have to go to their ASC, they don't give them a choice. Instead of, the kind of cornering the market saying you can only fly American Airlines and, you have to go to our ASC. And I try to explain to physicians, you need to explain to them the choice. Your financial person needs to say, this is my ASC, this would be your out of pocket, this is what outpatient at the hospital would be, and this is what, it would be if it qualifies for an OBL. And I get a lot of pushback there and saying, no, all procedures will go through our ASC. And I'm just like, okay, be careful with that because there are some states that frown on that practice.
Well, it's the way I recommend it is I take the stance that most imaging centers have to take, or anybody that does imaging. So, like an orthopedic practice that does imaging, has an X-ray, CT, whatever it is in their practice, they're required by law to have a document that communicates all their competition that also provide imaging that is around them, and that has to be handed to each patient. And you have to make them aware, look, we own this imaging center. We can get your imaging done right away, right here, while you're here right now. It's going to be nice and convenient. But we also are required to make you aware of the competitors that we have around us, and you are welcome to go to any one of those competitors.
Right.
Now, when you do this type of thing, it is a proven fact. I've been doing this for 25 years. And every time you are willing to provide this kind of information to a patient, almost 99.9% of the time, the patient's going to choose to get it done at your facility. They're already there working with you.
Yep.
They wouldn't be there if they didn't trust you. So they're going to take the recommendation and usually say, hey, I already know where this place is. I can come back here and do the procedure. I know these people. I trust these people, and so on. So most of the time, your patients are going to do it at your surgery center. I would just recommend, if you have competition and you're a surgery center, or even if you're doing imaging or anything like that, make them aware of, hey, you have other options here. You're being transparent. You're being honest. Why wouldn't more of your patients trust you for doing that versus just trying to tell them, oh, they have to have it here, because you are literally lining yourself up for an orange jumpsuit.
Yeah, I agree. No, that's great advice. And the last thing, and then we'll wrap this up, that I think is really important as far as some of the things you've set up and been able to help people with. People seem to think that the only authority in all this is CMS. And I'm finding that at the state level, even just supervision guidelines and allowables and things they have to do, states are actually pretty strict and different everywhere, from California to Texas to Pennsylvania to Florida. And we mentioned already, payer language and contracts. I find that most people forget they have to check in with their state.
Yeah.
You're like, just preaching to the choir.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody just ignores state regulations a lot of times, and that will be a mistake. That will come back to bite you in the rear end.
Yeah.
You definitely want to look at state regulations. You want to look at Department of Health requirements for your local community. You want to look at the feds. So CMS is where you start. Then you go down to state. Then you're probably going to deal with anybody. Like, let's just say let's say you're a vascular surgeon. You're going to use a fluoroscope. States have requirements for lead-lined walls, for any imaging, any radiation. You've got to look at all this stuff, because depending on what you're going to do, I mean, even you mentioned refrigeration.
Yeah.
You may have some states that have other types of safety requirements in any type of procedure room that other states may not require. So absolutely, you want to look at feds, you want to look at state, you want to look at payer requirements. I mean, as I tell everybody, and this is one thing that most people have gotten away from over the years, Way back when I got started, I used to see all kinds of billing people that would have payer binders lined up on shelves, and they'd be pulling policies and procedures and try to bring themselves up to speed on all the requirements to make sure that they were submitting procedures and claims properly.
I still have
Well,
those
what
binders.
happened to that? Because
Yeah.
nobody keeps that stuff
I
anymore.
still have those binders.
Nobody, yeah, I get it. There's no binders. It's an electronic binder now.
Yeah.
But the problem is, you look at, I mean, we're doing tons of revenue cycle assessments, and no biller keeps this information. They don't even go out and look for it.
I know.
What the heck happened?
We do a lot of
Did all of a
cleanup.
sudden we just decide we don't care what the laws are anymore or the regulations? We're just going to wing it and see what happens? I mean, it's just boggles my mind.
Yeah, I get the same
I don't
thing.
get it.
Yeah, we get a lot of more inquiries to clean up a problem than we do to, let's just implement compliance, or let's do a check-in on our, our E&M and audits. Someone like, okay, we got a TPE, or we got this audit, or you pick, or we're in trouble. I'm like, oh man. So,
It's kind of like the word proactive
yeah.
kind of went out from our vocabulary. Nobody knows what being proactive is anymore.
Well, and I think actually, and not to change the subject, but I think it got worse with COVID, because when they relaxed all of the waivers and they basically told everyone, do what you want, we won't check.
Yeah, and then they go and change it back, and everybody starts complaining, what, you're changing the rules on us again? Well, those were temporary.
Yeah, those were temporary.
You should have known that from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, it's, I'm not sure what's going on, but I think, in healthcare, you've got a lot more people that are ignoring things. They're thinking they're going to get away with it, and it's going to come back to bite you in the rear end.
Yeah,
it always does.
It always does. You just can't hide from it.
Exactly.
Well, I definitely appreciate all your insight here. And I know there's so much more we could dive into from a, regulatory and education standpoint. And I know at some point the NSCHBC will have a webinar on that. But David, thank you very much for being our guest today. Absolutely. Appreciate it. And thanks for asking me. So to find David or contact David, you can go to the NSCHBC website at nschbc.org and click on Find a Consultant. Type in his first name, David, or his last name, Zetter, Zetter, and his information will appear. Also, as a reminder, the nschbc.org website offers monthly webinars, free webinars on a variety of topics, as well as a Medicare quarterly regulatory update webinar. Please go to nschbc.org and click on the tab Upcoming Education. I'll be presenting the fourth quarter webinar update for Medicare on December 10th. Also, registration is now open for our Winter Workshop Consultants Retreat. Again, go to nschbc.org to review the agenda and speakers. That's it for us today, everyone. Make it a great day and a great rest of your month. And thank you for listening to the award-winning NSCHBC Edge podcast. I'm your host, Terry Fletcher.
Thank you for listening to the NSCHBC Edge podcast. Join us on the second Tuesday of each month as our consultants tackle the complexities of navigating the business of medicine. You can reach us on the web at nschbc.org, the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants.